There's a certain magic to a good bar, isn't there? A shared space where stories are born, friendships are forged, and the weight of the world seems to lift just for a little while. It's a sanctuary built on the clinking of glasses and the low murmur of conversation. But every sanctuary has its shadows. Every place of light has corners where darkness gathers. What happens when the comforting buzz of the crowd fades and you're left with something else? Something that was there all along, waiting in the silence. Have you ever been the last one at the bar, felt a sudden chill, and realized the friendly face behind the counter is looking through you? Tonight, we're not talking about spilled drinks or bad karaoke. We're pulling back the curtain on that comfortable facade. These are 3 disturbing, true stories from the heart of the nightlife, tales that prove sometimes the most terrifying things happen when you just want to grab a drink. Our first story comes from a woman named Clara, who worked as a bartender to put herself through college in the late 2000s. She worked at a quiet, neighborhood place called The Lamplight, a bar that prided itself on its regulars. It was cozy, familiar, and, for a long time, it felt like the safest place in the world. But safety, she learned, is just an illusion. She calls this story The Man Who Knew Too Much. Clara loved her job. The regulars were like a second family. There was Dave the construction worker, the 2 old ladies who shared a bottle of Chardonnay every Thursday, and then there was Silas. Silas was an elderly man, probably in his late 80s. He was impeccably dressed, always in a pressed shirt and tweed jacket, no matter the weather. He'd come in 3 times a week, sit at the far end of the bar, order 1 glass of neat whiskey, and make it last for exactly 2 hours. He was quiet, polite, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. For the first few months, he was just part of the scenery. But then, small things started to happen. One evening, as Clara was wiping down the counter, Silas cleared his throat. "That history paper on the Carolingian dynasty," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "You should focus on the ecclesiastical reforms. Your professor has a soft spot for it." Clara froze. She was a history major, and that was the exact paper she was stressing over. She hadn't told anyone at the bar, not in that detail. She laughed it off, nervously. "Wow, good guess. Are you a history buff, Silas?" He just gave her a thin, watery smile. "You could say that. I've been around for a lot of it." It was a strange comment, but she dismissed it as the odd ramblings of an old man. A week later, he did it again. Clara was worried about her cat, Patches, who hadn't been eating. As Silas was leaving, he placed his empty glass on the counter and said, without looking at her, "Try mixing some warm water into Patches' food. It helps with the appetite." He then walked out before she could even ask how he knew her cat's name, let alone that it was sick. This is when the unease started to curdle into genuine fear. He knew things. Not just general things, but specific, intimate details of her life. He once hummed a lullaby that only her grandmother, who had passed away years ago, used to sing to her. When Clara asked him where he heard that song, Silas's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I hear all sorts of things. Beautiful memories." The other regulars noticed nothing. To them, he was just a quiet old man. But to Clara, his presence began to feel heavy, oppressive. It felt like he was siphoning her life, her memories, just by sitting there. This is one of those classic bartender horror stories that you hear whispered about, the kind where a customer is just wrong. But this was happening to her. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. It was storming outside, and the bar had cleared out early. By 11:30 p.m., it was just her and Silas. She announced last call. He just nodded and took a slow sip of his whiskey. She started her closing duties, wiping tables, stacking stools, her back to him most of the time. The silence in the bar was thick, only broken by the rain lashing against the windows. When she turned back to the bar, Silas was still there. It was almost midnight. "Silas, I'm sorry. I really have to close up now." He finally looked up at her, and the polite, grandfatherly facade was gone. His eyes were dark, ancient, and filled with a chilling emptiness. "You're a bright one, Clara," he said, his voice losing its raspy quality, becoming smoother, colder. "So many vibrant memories. That first time you rode a bicycle without training wheels. The sheer joy of it. I enjoyed that one." Clara's blood ran cold. "How? How do you know that?" He stood up, and for a man his age, he moved with a fluid grace that was deeply unnatural. "I was there," he said, taking a step towards the side of the bar to walk around it. "Just like I was there when your grandmother sang you that lullaby." Her voice was much stronger then, of course. Sweeter. Panic seized her. She fumbled for the phone under the counter, but he was already moving around the bar, his steps silent. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't threatening violence, which was somehow worse. He was calm, like a collector admiring a new piece. "Please," Clara whispered, backing away towards the kitchen door. "Just leave." "I am a connoisseur of moments, my dear," Silas said, his smile widening into something that didn't fit his face. "A life is a tapestry of them. I just appreciate the threads, and yours are so very colorful." Clara didn't wait for another word. She bolted through the kitchen door, slammed it shut, and ran out the back exit into the pouring rain, not even stopping to lock it. She ran for 3 blocks without looking back, her heart hammering against her ribs. She called the police from a payphone, but by the time they arrived at the lamplight, the bar was empty. The front door was locked from the inside, and Silas's whiskey glass sat on the bar, wiped clean of prints. There was no sign of him. Clara quit the next day. She couldn't set foot in that place again. The bar was sold about a year later. She never saw Silas again, but for the rest of her life, she's been haunted by his words. She says that sometimes, when she's experiencing a moment of pure happiness, she feels a sudden, inexplicable chill, and she knows, somewhere out there, he's enjoying the memory too. Our next story takes us to a different kind of place. Not a cozy neighborhood joint, but a true dive bar on the outskirts of a forgotten industrial town. It was called the Rusty Mug, and it was the kind of place you went to when you didn't want to be found. In 2015, a group of 4 friends, looking for what they called an authentic night out, ended up there. They thought it would be a funny story to tell. They got a story, all right, but it's not one they ever tell. This is the story of the jukebox that played regrets. The group, we'll call them Liam, Chloe, Ben, and Maya, walked into the Rusty Mug and were immediately hit by the smell of stale beer, bleach, and something else. Something old and dusty. The place was nearly empty, save for a grizzled bartender who looked like he'd been carved from the bar itself. In the corner, under a flickering neon sign, sat a magnificent, old Wurlitzer jukebox. It was covered in a layer of dust, and most notably, it was unplugged. Its thick, frayed cord lay coiled on the floor beside it. After a couple of cheap beers, Ben, the jokester of the group, stumbled over to the jukebox. "Hey, let's see if this old relic works," he slurred, pulling a quarter from his pocket. "Dude, it's not even plugged in," Chloe said, rolling her eyes. "You gotta have faith," Ben declared dramatically. He jammed the coin into the slot. Nothing happened. He shrugged and was about to walk away when a low hum started. The dusty-colored panels of the jukebox began to glow, a warm, eerie light filling the dark corner of the bar. The mechanical arm inside, moving with a ghostly silence, selected a record. As song began to play, it wasn't a hit. It wasn't anything they recognized. It was a soft, simple piano melody. Across the table, Maya went completely pale. Her drink trembled in her hand. "What's wrong?" Liam asked her. "That song," Maya whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "My grandfather. He composed that. He was a musician, but he was never successful. He used to play it for me before he passed away. No one else has ever heard it." The atmosphere at the table shifted instantly from drunken fun to sober confusion. It had to be a coincidence. A wild, impossible coincidence. The song ended, and the jukebox went dark again. After a moment of tense silence, Chloe, ever the skeptic, stood up. "Okay, that's weird. Let me try." She walked over, put her own quarter in, and again the machine whirred to life. It selected a different record. This time, it was an old folk song, sung by a woman with a shaky but sweet voice. Chloe just stared at the jukebox, her face ashen. Tears started to stream down her cheeks. She explained that it was a recording from an old cassette tape she had of her mother, who died in a car accident when Chloe was a child, singing her favorite song. The tape had been destroyed in a basement flood years ago. This was no longer a coincidence. This was something else. This experience was rapidly becoming one of the most creepy bar encounters they could ever imagine. The jukebox wasn't just playing songs, it was playing memories. Specifically, lost and painful ones. Ben, who had started the whole thing, refused to go near it again. But Liam, the quietest of the group, felt a morbid curiosity pulling at him. A dread mixed with a strange desire to know what it would play for him. "Liam, don't," Maya pleaded. But he felt compelled. He walked over to the silent machine, his heart pounding. He slid his quarter in. The light, the hum, the ghostly arm moving to select a record. He braced himself for a song from his childhood, a forgotten favorite. But what came out of the speakers was not a song. It was the sound of a little girl laughing. Then, the sound of squealing tires and a sickening crunch. And then, silence. Liam stumbled back from the jukebox as if he'd been punched. The others stared at him, horrified. They didn't understand the sounds, but they saw the look of pure terror and guilt on his face. Liam had never told anyone, not even his closest friends, about the neighborhood girl he was playing with when he was 8 years old. The girl who chased a ball he'd accidentally thrown into the street. The girl who he watched get hit by a car. The sound the jukebox played wasn't a memory of loss. It was a memory of his deepest, most secret shame. They fled. They threw cash on the table and ran out of the rusty mug, leaving the jukebox glowing silently in the corner. They drove home in complete silence, the unspoken horror hanging between them. Their friendship was never the same after that night. They drifted apart, fractured by the secrets that a dusty, unplugged jukebox in a forgotten bar had decided to play out loud. Liam says he still has nightmares, not of the accident itself, but of the sound of that ghostly arm selecting a record meant just for him. Sometimes, the horror isn't psychological. It isn't a ghost or a memory. Sometimes, it's very, very real, waiting behind a locked door. Our final story is one of those cautionary tales that gets passed down from employee to employee, a story that serves as a grim warning. It takes place in a centuries-old Irish pub in Boston, a place famous for its history. But some history should stay buried. This is the story of The One Rule. In the early 90s, a young man named Kevin got a job as a stock boy at O'Malley's, an authentic Irish pub with dark wood interiors and floors that had been worn smooth by generations of patrons. The owner was a gruff but fair man named Mr. Finn. On Kevin's first day, after showing him the ropes, Mr. Finn took him to the back, to a heavy oak door bound with iron straps. It led to the sub-basement. "All right, lad," Mr. Finn said, his face unusually serious. "There's only one rule in this pub you can never, ever break. It's the most important one. You stock the shelves, you change the kegs, you do what you're told. But this door," he said, patting the cold iron, "this door stays locked after we close. From midnight until sunrise, you do not open it. I don't care what you think you hear. I don't care if you think the building is on fire down there. You do not open this door. Do you understand me?" Kevin, a bit taken aback by the intensity, nodded. "Yes, sir. I understand." He assumed it was some kind of old electrical wiring issue or a rat problem they didn't want to admit to. He put it out of his mind. For the first month, the job was great. He loved the atmosphere of the pub. He'd often stay late, after the last customers had stumbled out, helping clean up and restock for the next day, enjoying the quiet of the old building. The basement door remained a silent, forgotten fixture. Then, one Thursday night, it started. He was in the main stockroom around 1 a.m., well after closing. From behind the heavy oak door, he heard a sound, a faint scratching. Scratch, scratch, scrape, like a dog wanting to be let in. Kevin froze, remembering Mr. Finn's words. It was probably just rats, he told himself. Big ones. He tried to ignore it, turning up the radio he'd brought with him. The next week, the sound was back, only this time it was different. It wasn't scratching anymore. It was tapping, a slow, rhythmic tapping. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded deliberate. It sounded like a fingernail on wood. It made the hair on his arms stand up. He quickly finished his work and left, a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He considered asking Mr. Finn about it, but he didn't want to seem like a coward. The sounds grew more insistent over the following weeks. The tapping became pounding, as if a fist was hammering against the other side of the door. And then the voice started. It was faint at first, a high-pitched, reedy whisper that wormed its way through the cracks around the door. Hello? Is anyone there? It sounded like a child, a little girl. Kevin's heart leapt into his throat. His rational mind screamed at him that it was impossible. The door was locked from this side. There was no other way in or out of that sub-basement. But the voice sounded so real, so scared. Please, the voice would cry, night after night. It's so dark in here. Let me out, I'm cold. Kevin was tormented. He was losing sleep. During the day, the pub was cheerful and loud, but at night, it was just him and the voice from behind the door. He was convinced some horrible tragedy had happened, that a child had somehow gotten trapped down there. Mr. Finn's warning began to seem cruel, monstrous. How could he just leave a child locked in the dark? This was one of those true scary stories that felt like it was unfolding in real time, and he was the main character. Finally, one night, he couldn't take it anymore. The pleading from behind the door was more frantic than ever, interspersed with heartbreaking sobs. Mr. Finn had gone home hours ago. Kevin was alone. His conscience warred with the old man's solemn warning. The voice cried out, "Are you going to leave me in here forever?" His humanity won. He thought, to hell with the rules. He grabbed the heavy iron key from the hook where Mr. Finn kept it. His hand trembled as he slid it into the lock. He turned it. With a loud clunk, the old bolt slid back. He pulled on the heavy iron ring, and the door groaned open into a pitch-black space that smelled of damp earth and something else. Something sweet and rotten, like spoiled meat. Hello? Kevin called into the darkness, his voice shaking. Are you okay? There was no answer. The crying had stopped. A profound silence emanated from the blackness. He fumbled for the light switch on the wall, but it just clicked uselessly. Taking a deep breath, he took a small step over the threshold, peering into the gloom. Hello? He said again. From the far corner of the small, stone-walled room, two tiny points of pale light appeared. They weren't eyes. They were too small, too dim. They hovered in the dark, and then a voice, the same high-pitched, childlike voice he'd been hearing for weeks, whispered from the corner. Thank you. And then the voice changed. It deepened, stretched, becoming a guttural, wet sound that was not human. We were so hungry. The two pale lights were not its eyes. They were lures. The real eyes, huge and black and reflecting no light, opened above them. Kevin didn't even have time to scream. The heavy oak door, moved by some unseen force, slammed shut behind him. The old iron bolt slid back into place from the inside with a deafening clank. Kevin was never seen again. When Mr. Finn came in the next morning, the key was missing from its hook. He knew immediately what had happened. He never spoke of it, but the next boy he hired was given the same solemn warning, this time with a look of haunted grief in his eyes. The patrons of O'Malley's still enjoy their pints, unaware that the pub's oldest resident the one that's been there since the foundation was laid, is occasionally fed by those who are too kind or too curious for their own good. A bar is a crossroads, a place where lives intersect for a fleeting moment. But sometimes, what you cross paths with isn't from the same world you are. A man who collects memories, a jukebox that plays regrets, and a hunger that waits patiently behind a locked door. These stories remind us that even in the most familiar places, you should never let your guard down completely, because you never truly know who or what is sitting on the stool next to you. What about you? Have you ever had a strange or unsettling experience at a bar late at night? Let us know in the comments below. We read all of them. And if you enjoyed being terrified with us tonight and want to hear more stories from the shadows, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into darkness. Until next time, stay safe.